What's up guys, Aroneous here with another Raid Shadow Legends video, and in today's video I'm going to be going over the Aroneous fusion. So basically I'm just going to be going over why or why not I'm going to be going for this fusion, and then we're going to take it from there. So first I'm just going to be going over the champion skills, the kit, and then why and where I think you can use this champion, who should be going for this champion at this time. So let's get into it. So obviously, just taking a look at Aroneous first glance, she looks amazing. I mean, she's an amazing looking champion, and if you guys are into horror, I'm a huge horror fan, and I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, but Hellraiser, I'm sure there are many people out there who have probably seen it. A lot of you that watch my videos are between the age of 22 and like 35 years old, so I'm sure that you've probably watched the movie before. But Hellraiser, she looks exactly like one of Hellraiser's minions, or like a wife for Hellraiser, but she looks insane. The aesthetics are always top notch from the Plarium creators, so of course she looks amazing. Aesthetics aside, we're looking at her kit. She's in the Dark Elves faction, and she's a Force affinity, so pretty good against the magic type, right? So it's always going to be either Force or magic, typically in Arena, for the nukers, especially when it comes to like Foley, Trunda, Candrafon, so on and so forth. And then you've got your really big heavy damage dealer in the Aroneous, which is a Void legendary and now Baron, but it's a lot of times magic and Force. So taking a look at her kit here, we've got Reaper's Due, attacks one enemy 2 times, 50% chance to place the 2 extra hits if the target's under Hex. Her kit is surrounded by Hex debuff, so she's a setup type champion. So there's the first thing, and a lot of people that are endgame do not like setup type champions, especially if they're attack based, because the first thing they look at when they're endgame is this champion going to be hitting hard for me, yes or no? And a lot of times they just say, okay, they don't hit over this specific threshold, then meh, I don't really want them, because first of all, they require setup, and second of all, they just don't hit hard enough. And you'll see a lot of videos out there from content creators who make these damage dealer type videos. Are they good? And they're basing a lot of how good they are just off of how much damage they can do. I will say, she's not the best damage dealer out there, but she's also definitely not the worst in terms of legendary champions. However, there are epics like Skullcrown, for example, who can hit just about as hard, if not as hard or harder, than this champion Aroneous. So the second one that she has for an ability is attacks all enemies, 75% chance of placing a Hex, and a 60% decreased defense. Now, Hex has been up and coming in the game. It's getting stronger and stronger when it comes to bosses. So like Hydra heads, there are certain heads if you put Hex on them. For example, one of the heads, I think it's the head of Mischief, if I'm not mistaken. You can leave it down in the comments below if I'm wrong. But this head has a 75% chance to take your attack and deflect it, basically. So you then end up attacking a different Hydra head. So with the Hex, it makes it so that Hydra's skill is pretty much on cooldown as long as you have the Hex on that Hydra head. So when you do attack that Hydra head, it doesn't have a 75% chance to then deflect your damage or deflect your attack to another Hydra. So that's kind of cool in Hydra, but everywhere else in the game, there's only a few different setup champions that are really strong, and that is Tia the Tomb Angel, Ruel Huntmaster, and Mithrala, who has a good kit. So this would be really good paired with maybe Mithrala in Arena, maybe Ruel in Dungeons or in Doom Tower, the Waves, also in Arena, but not really meta. I don't think it's going to be changing the game for Arena, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I really don't think it's going to change the game in Arena. So decreased defense, if you have decreased defense champions already that are attack all enemies and decreases their defense up to 100% chance, then more than likely you probably don't need to go for this champion, because you already have decreased defense champs. Like I have Herndig, he's a decreased defense and decreased accuracy champ. I have Tomb Lord, decreased defense and decreased attack champ. I have Madame Saris, decreased defense and decreased attack champ. So there are other champions out there that can do this job. On the A3, attacks all enemies, ignores unkillable buffs and shield buffs if the targets are under a Hex. Again, requires setup. So the biggest issue here is that this champion requires setup. So somebody has to go before her, or she has to take a turn, and then you need to have someone like a Kymar or a Renegade to reset the skills as quickly as possible, but also making sure that you're CCing the enemy team, so that way she can take a turn again, so she can go from the A2, decrease defense, over to the A3, attack all enemies to ignore unkillable and shields. And it does say here on her passive, increases the champion's attack by 5% for each enemy under a hex, so it's about 20% in arena, because there's only going to be 4 champions you're going against, and then in other areas of the game like Spider, there's going to be like 10 Spiderlings, and then the Spider Queen, or whatever you want to call her, the Spider, the big Spider, and of course she's going to be doing a lot more damage there, but I don't think that's where she's suitable. Maybe she does okay there, but I just don't think that's the spot for her. I think it would be like arena, and also in dungeon wave progression, definitely in Dark Elf faction crypt, and a little bit in Hydra as well with this hex debuff. So places an unkillable on the A3 on this champion for 1 turn if the attack kills an enemy without a hex debuff, and places an unkillable buff for 2 turns instead if this attack kills an enemy under a hex debuff. So it's nice that she could, if they have a hex debuff on the floor and kills that enemy, and that she gets a 2-turn unkillable, but I don't think it's really that strong in my opinion. I just don't think it's strong enough unless you have a reset champion like Kymar or Renegade or Yumeko. And it does have this on the passive as well, resets the cooldown of an inexorable end skill whenever this champion kills an enemy under a hex. So I just don't think that her kit is strong enough for the end game user, the late game user who has all the different champions already in their roster that can do these things, right? So like I've unlocked Tia the Tomb Angel. Would she be cool with Tia the Tomb Angel? Absolutely. But the other reason why a lot of people aren't going for her is because the simple fact that the tournaments are kind of outlandish. So you go to Dragon Tournament, you're going for a rare, okay? So this is clearly, this tournament, this fusion is here to stop you in your tracks. I have a feeling, a strange feeling, that the next fusion for the Halloween fusion is going to be even better than this fusion. And if that's the case, I do highly implore you to not go for this fusion. Now, if you're mid-game, if you're low spender, if you're early game, you don't have many decreased defense champs, you don't have hex champions, maybe this champion's the one for you. In that case, I highly suggest going for this champion. I'm not saying that she's a bad champion. I'm just saying that a lot of people who have been playing this game for a long time, she might not have a ton of use cases for them. For me, for example, I am a very late game, close to end game, as I consider myself end game free to play. I'm not an end game when it comes to like whales or spenders, things like that nature, but late game for sure. And I consider myself to be at the point where I don't need another decreased defense attack based champion. I already have it. I don't need any champions for my Dark Elves anymore. I've completed all of Faction Wars. I have all my champions for decreased defense. I have Lydia for decreased defense weaken. I have Tomb Lord for decreased defense, decreased attack. I have Herndig for decreased defense, decreased accuracy. I have Genzin, he has decreased defense. I have Madame Ceres, decreased defense. You know, so many champions that I have at this point that can do decreased defense and or weaken, or decreased defense and attack, that I just don't see her fitting on my roster. Like, she would just be an extra tag team arena champion basically at the end of the day. Maybe I would use her a little bit to mess around with in PvE or dungeons, just in general, PvE progression or Hydra progression. I just don't see that I'm going to be using her that often. Plus, you've got this other Mighty Uko champion as well, who has the block buffs, decrease accuracy, increase speed, decrease attack. He's got the speed in all battles. Like, this guy was definitely worth going for 100% for anybody out there. For her, I just feel like this is a skippable fusion. I also would say that Lanatharil was a skippable fusion, and I do believe that Lanatharil was definitely a skippable fusion. However, I went for Lanatharil, and I'm actually excited to have him. So, just because Lanatharil was ragged on, and this champion is getting ragged on by a lot of content creators. I will say it doesn't necessarily mean you won't have a use case for this champion. So I do highly implore you, if you can get her, get her. If you have the resources, go for it. But I do suggest and recommend that if you want to save your resources for the Halloween fusion, you probably should do that if you don't really care too much about this champion. It's okay to skip fusions. It's not the end of the world. Fusions are honestly here to deplete resources. They're here to make it so that you spend all your resources on the wrong things, at the wrong time, not necessarily on the wrong things, but at the wrong time, right? And then you won't have resources to get the next best thing. The game is made so that people can waste resources and then spend money, right? So if you have patience, you can skip this fusion. You can get another champion. There's literally a rare champion that you can get that is just fine. It's a rare barbarian champion. I mean, you can literally just get War Maiden, decreased defense, 100% chance to book it. She's also a force champion. So it does the same thing. It just doesn't have, she just doesn't have Hex in her kit. So, and she doesn't have the unkillable and all the fancy schmancy things. So yeah, War Maiden's not going to be as strong, but she's going to land the decreased defense for you just fine. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not going for this fusion. This is a first fusion in a while that I'm actually not going for. I'm going to conserve my resources. I'm going to try my best to save up for the Halloween fusion. I'm hoping that I end up getting even more sacred shards, like maybe hopefully by the next fusion I'll have 5 or 6 sacred shards stored up. I'll have maybe 40 or 50, maybe even 60 ancient shards, and I'm hoping to have about between 10 and 20 void shards. So it's gonna be big pulls in the future. But anyways, that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.